This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
This is Things I Found Online. Something we have found is that there are many things online. And you found this, a podcast about finding things online. We salute you. Yes.
Well done.
You're here. And I'm Jamie Alcroft. And today's show will touch my donated, recycled heart. We're talking about grief and organ donorship with my good friend, Michael Lieben. I am the honored recipient of a new heart and liver. Michael made the brave decision to donate his daughter's organs. So today's panel includes Danny Mann and, of course, our hostess with the mostest, Louise Palenka.
Much rejoicing ensued.
Thank you, greetings, and welcome, Michael. You are joining us from Israel. At what time is it, Michael?
It's a joy to be here at 3 a.m. I've got nothing better to do.
So you're joining us from Israel, and it's 3 a.m. I'm sending you a Starbucks DoorDash.
Wow.
Yes, compliments of all.
And before we get to you, Michael, I want to catch up with my co-hosts here. Danny, Jamie, what's going on? Anything I should know about here in America?
Well, we've adopted a child together.
Yes.
No,
It's a rescue child.
But he's been spayed.
Yes. And they got all the shots.
Though just sort of a fun but slightly sad notice that I just found out, and apparently this is a few days old now, but Ed Kooky Burns passed away,
From 77
Sunset Strip. When I first moved to LA, there were three things I wanted to do. I wanted to go to a Dodger game, go to Disneyland, and drive by 77 Sunset Strip and Dino's.
Yeah. And did you do it?
We did it, and I was shocked to find out that wasn't the actual address. But
What's located at 77 Sunset Strip?
there was
nothing now.
Just a guy clicking his
A
fingers.
guy snapping his fingers and a
Anything
comb.
now. We'd have to check on
No,
that. Let's look that up.
It was Dino's. It was an actual
that would be
club.
a thing we could find online.
There you go.
77 Sunset Strip. We should look at that and try to
But
find
Kooky,
out.
when we were kids, that was like, oh my God, if you could be him, that was.
He was the
I could
coolest,
lend you
right?
my
He was the
comb if you
coolest.
want.
I mean, we're obviously okay boomers here,
And-
talking about Ed Kooky Burns.
Right. And check out the record, Kooky, Lend Me Your Comb, which was him and Connie Stevens, which was a riot.
It was a
hit
riot.
record.
It was so corny. It was great. And it was a hit record.
And Dina just lost her lunch.
People will vote for anything, won't
She's
they?
going, how did I get stuck?
Anyone.
How did I get stuck in an old folks home here?
It was rap, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I got back on the bench this week, made some jewelry.
Oh, I thought maybe
Yeah.
you lifted your weight.
I thought you got.
No, I don't.
I thought you got drafted by the Celtics or something.
That would be nice.
Well, let's show us the jewelry that you make,
That would
Jamie.
be, it's radio. I mean,
It's
it's
radio
a
jewelry.
podcast. It's radio jewelry. There's one.
Oh,
So you get a close up of that.
for the folks at home, it's a lovely bracelet.
Lovely. Oh, you can get a close
Made
up
from
of that.
old license
Holy crap.
plates.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
Look at that.
The craftsmanship.
Oh, it's focusing
When did we
on
And
my
where,
face.
where can people purchase your jewelry, Jamie?
There. Oh, I have a website now. It's called Silver by Jamie. And where did I do with that one? Oh, I think it's here.
How did this turn into
Oh, don't worry,
QVC?
it's only live.
We just become a
Interesting-
shopping network.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is that I cut off the waist off of this bracelet, and with the waist off of this bracelet, I made a pendant.
And then you cut the waist off the pendant.
So
and made these earrings.
when you have your shears and you cut the waist off the side of this,
the waist.
yeah, the waist sheet, because you have to put this wire on top of a sheet and solder it, make sure everything's soldered before you bend it. I had this little piece of silver that came off, and this was the shape that it made. So I just made a pendant out of it. Huh?
That's
Kinda
beautiful.
fun.
This is
Yeah.
compelling radio.
Beautiful?
Yeah, that
I don't know.
makes for some
I
good
don't know
radio.
whether it's beautiful or not.
It is.
Well, I would
But
like to
it's-
proudly announce that my film, Margaret Singer Seeking Light, will be
yes.
screening at the SPIF, the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, this Sunday, January 19th at 5 p.m. Jamie is coming. Danny,
I
would
am.
you like to come? It's only 20 minutes. You'll be home before dark.
I love
I'll be yelling at the screen.
And we have a link for that, boys in the booth.
Oh, we
Margaret
do?
Singer,
Margaret Singer. There she
Seeking
is.
Light, 97-year-old beautiful artist who's sitting on the floor in her own apartment with her work surrounding her. And SPIF is one of the greatest film festivals internationally of all time.
Really? Why?
It just is.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah,
answer.
It is,
It's
because
the
she
whole-
said it was.
the
Because I
whole-
said so.
Yeah, because she said it
The
was.
whole town shuts down, and films are playing in like 6 different locations around town from like 8 in the morning till midnight. And there's a red carpet and Klieg lights, which makes
It'll
it.
be Sunday?
No, there's red carpets at night.
Got my.
Maybe as we leave, there'll be red carpets. Ushering us out.
Why don't we stay for the red carpet?
Well, we'll figure it all out. Believe me, it's.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to the film.
Yeah,
and Renee Zellweger will be there.
Renee Zellweger will be there.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Red carpet cleaners
Thursday.
must make a lot of
See,
money.
there's something different every day. Oh yeah, red carpet.
That's
cleaners.
a great living.
It's also a great band name, I think.
Red carpet cleaners.
Yeah.
I saw them in concert with Purple Haze.
So we're
Strawberry
we're walking
alarm
the
clock.
red carpet on Friday night. My co-filmmaker and I, Jenny Reinisch, are walking the red carpet on Friday night with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson.
Oh my gosh,
Louise.
And I'm anticipating that they will say to me,
Yes.
"You're in my light."
Can I have your autograph?
Louise.
Yes.
Louise, who are you wearing?
Oh, Gap. Michael.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gap.
Michael is with us from Israel. Are you awake, Michael? Or have we put
yes,
you to sleep?
I brought some toothpicks though, just to be.
We are a
safe
sleep aid.
if I need them.
To put them in your mouth or put
Michael-
them in your eyes?
Michael
No,
is
keep
a
my
man.
eyes open if I need them, but at the moment, I'm doing all right. This is my normal internet hours. People who know me online know that this is when I'm haunting.
This is
the
when
world.
you're
So
really
I'm out there.
haunting the internet.
Michael is a man engaged in an epic struggle to become a former filmmaker. He is also a film teacher in Israeli schools. Over the years,
I
he has
used to be a film teacher. Thank God I'm out of that.
over the years
but
he has
I-
participated in
I
some.
did it for 18
I'm
years. and
reading
I
your
loved it.
bio, Michael. Good Lord. Over the
He's
years,
never
he-
been at a show like this
Michael.
before.
Over the years, he has participated in summer courses for Israeli high schools where Jewish and Arab students work together to make films. He was born and raised in New York and has been living in Israel for 40 years. How did you come to emigrate to Israel, Michael?
Can I get
A witness?
philosophical?
Or do you want to answer the first question
Yes,
first?
you can get philosophical. Of
Second
course.
Can I
We're
wax
very-
philosophical? A bunch of reasons. First of all, in the 1930s, my mother lived here as a small child. She was also born in New York, so her getting here was kind of a thing. So it was kind of always in us to do that.
To mysteriously emigrate to Israel as children? It was always
Not to
it kind of runs in
mysteriously,
the family?
no, not at all. I came as a student, made it easier. By the time I got here, two of my sisters were living here. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. But besides that, I've always felt that I had a certain privilege being born when I was and where I was, and that I had an opportunity in my lifetime to participate in two of the most interesting political experiments. One was self-rule in the United States, which is still an experiment.
It's just
and still
working
on-
out great.
Well, not every experiment, but it'll be fine. I promise you that.
Okay.
And the other experiment is the Jewish people reconstituting themselves in their land after 2,000 years. And as hokey as that sounds, that was a real motivator.
Yeah.
So there was the religious aspect, there was the social aspect, there was all kinds of things. And I have shoals of family here. So it wasn't a bad thing to do. And it seemed like a really good idea at the time. And
it transcends religion because it's cultural, really.
Well, how big
It's a
of a
culture
role
that
did
you've gone
falafels
to.
play in your decision?
Falafel
Really
did not
great
play a
falafels.
single bit in that decision.
But
Had
good
nothing
guess,
to do with
Louise.
it.
Here's what you win.
It wasn't the food. Trust me, it wasn't the food.
It wasn't the food.
And are you in Jerusalem?
Yes, I am.
Ah, okay.
Yes, I am.
Now, Michael, tell us about your daughter Liel. We have photos to show of Liel.
Oh, thank you for
We
getting
want
that
to
right.
hear
There
what type
she
of
is.
a person.
There she is.
Gail was born with a heart disease, double outlet right ventricle. Without getting too deep into the technicals of that, it means the aorta was on the wrong side of the heart, and blood was not able to get out to the rest of her body. But as the doctor pointed out, whenever nature cocks up really badly, it does another smaller cock up to compensate. And so she had a hole in her heart that enabled the blood to spill over to the wrong side and find the aorta and get out. And she could live like that for not very long, but she was corrected at about age 2.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the hole that had been keeping her alive, what they were going to do is the idea was to build a bridge across that hole to lead the blood to the aorta, basically giving her 4 separate functioning chambers in the heart. And unfortunately, that hole began to close down. And so they had to widen it. And they knew going in that was the area where the heart naturally paces itself. So we traded up from double outlet right ventricle to 100% heart block, which meant the heart couldn't pace itself, couldn't beat on its own, at least not well enough.
Okay.
So she had at that point, when they did the fix, they also put in a pacemaker.
Right.
And it's not the kind of pacemaker that we hear about that, waits and monitors and gives you a zap. This was 24/7. Without it, she just wouldn't beat.
Right.
So she had that, and at age 10, that was replaced. And everything really was fine. And hematologically, and as far as her cardiological situation, she was actually pretty good. And around age 4, she developed autism, and that didn't take her. What they don't tell you is that about half of the kids who develop autism also, by the time they hit puberty, will also develop epilepsy.
Oh, my goodness.
And no, by the time she was 13 and a half and started showing epilepsy, you could have knocked me over with a feather, because I thought we had discovered everything that you could possibly find wrong with her, right?
Yeah.
But no. And they all laughed at me. They said, this is the easy one. We can handle this. It's easy to balance her with medications. And, of course, Julius Caesar was an epileptic. So, okay, so my daughter was going to go out and conquer half the known world. But she didn't. And what they don't tell you with epilepsy in children is that up until about age 20, and now I hear from the police, maybe 25, there's a thing called SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And there's no reason for it. It just happens or it doesn't. And that's apparently what started on a Friday morning. I was working the overnight, and I got a call at 6:15 in the morning, from the woman who runs the home where my daughter was living. By then she was living near Haifa, which is about 2 hours north of here. And she was in tears, and she said, you got to get here. So, when you see her name on the phone at 6 in the morning, it's never a good sign, because why would they be calling her? So we got there, and we got up to the hospital around just before noon. And the doctor, a really, really fine, wonderful human being, he said, you've got two choices. He said, bad and really bad. And you should know that really bad is that she might wake up. So I skipped over everything, went straight into acceptance, realizing what was going on, that it was probably SUDEP happening, and they had stopped it long enough to get to the hospital. But by the time we got there, there was already untold amounts of brain damage, and who knows what else was going on. So waking up was not really a great option. So we sent a taxi and had the kids come up. And, the four of us were together for the weekend, and that was on a Friday, and I think on Monday night they finally pronounced brain death. Now, the rules here are complicated about death. Death is only determined at brain death for purposes of transplants and everything else. So it takes a few days, because there has to be no brain activity. They have to do a CT to prove there's no brain activity, and then the whole case is given over to two doctors who don't know the case, who have to review it. So it took about 4 days for this saga to end, during which time my children and I and my wife, we all had some very interesting conversations, and we got to learn a lot about ourselves. So there was that. And on Saturday afternoon, I guess that's the next day, Saturday or Sunday, my wife and I are walking around the hospital, talking and just thinking about stuff. And she says, ask the doctor about transplants. I want to do that. It hadn't even occurred to me. That's how disconnected I was, because that's something, of course, that, we would want to do. So she put that in the back of my head, and it stayed there. And then on, I guess, Monday morning or Sunday, Monday morning, the doctor called us in for the end of life conversation that you're supposed to have. And he said there are two things we can do. We can, once we get a determination of brain death, we can shut off everything. Or we can leave the breathing apparatus on, and then she'll crash in about an hour to 24 hours. The idea being that your family can say you've done everything. You didn't turn her off. So I thought about it. I discussed it with a rabbi friend of mine. He said, look, if she's not in any pain, let it go to the end. Mm-hmm. So that was my first decision, was let it go and leave the breathing apparatus on. And the doctor said, well, okay, but then we can't do anything about transplants. And I said, wait a minute. My wife said, let's talk about transplants. Wait a minute, go back. So everything changed, and the doctor turned white, because in Israel it's not overly popular for a lot of reasons, which we can talk about. Mm-hmm. And normally the doctors have to beg you to transplant, and then you say no, and then it goes like that. So the doctor fell over because never before had a patient said, yeah, we really want to do that. So suddenly the transplant coordinator shows up, everybody comes in, and the decision is you have to leave all the machines on because the body now is an incubator, basically a refrigerator, keeping everything.
Correct.
It's a refrigerator, but it keeps
Fresh.
everything warm. The idea is to keep everything going as if it were still alive.
Especially the kidneys. Mm-hmm.
So we had to do that. And then the question was, we knew the heart was of no use to anybody, but she had surgery near the heart, which might have affected the lungs. And the question was, if anybody wants the lungs, we don't do that here. She's got to be shipped off to Tel Aviv where they have a heart-lung machine, and they can do that. Mm. So we waited around till about 2 a.m. after we got the decision, the determination of brain death. We waited around till 2 a.m. This was New Year's Eve, by the way. And we found somebody in Tel Aviv who needed the lungs, and they were willing to give it to her. It was a 66-year-old woman of small stature. And there were no children at that time in Israel who needed a lung. So she got the lungs, which meant we had to go back home to Jerusalem and wait an extra day. And then they shipped her off to Tel Aviv, and we didn't see her again until the funeral. Mm-hmm. And along the way, you know this, I think, Jamie, we gave that 66-year-old woman got 2 lungs. A 54-year-old woman got, if I'm not mistaken, the liver. Somebody got the pancreas. I'm not sure where that went. And a 45-year-old woman got a kidney, and a 7.5-year-old Palestinian girl who turns out lives 10 minutes from here, got the other kidney. And she's an amazing story because the parents had told her they're not going to find anybody. They can't hold her on dialysis much longer, and they should prepare for the worst. Yeah. So that's the story we're most
save lives.
Wow.
Save so many lives.
Yeah.
And I know that you're reticent to use the word hero. In my previous conversations with you, you've kind of dismissed that, but I will repeat for the sake of this podcast that the definition of the word hero is someone doing the right thing at the right time. So I think both you and your wife qualify, and certainly Liel qualifies.
And someone doing the right thing when it's really hard and heartbreaking and difficult and scary and painful and
I
all
appreciate that, but I got to tell you,
unknown and so unknown, and but you were in much more of a vacuum than say maybe an American family would have been going through the same experience because of the frequency of the transplants over here.
But maybe being from America was what inspired him or informed him in ways that you can move forward and inspire and inform perhaps other Israelis that this is something
that
should be culturally more acceptable. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I think all of that's true. I don't think we're particularly heroic. I also want to say we had been making decisions about life and death for 15 and a half years.
Sure.
So this was probably the easiest decision we ever had to make regarding Liel because she was already gone. And the only thing we do is try to do something good with the fact that she was gone. And that was actually an easy decision. Some people think, wow, that must have been creepy, must have been weird. No. There are 3 really good reasons to do transplants. One is saving a life is a good thing. And in Judaism, it's the number 1 top priority. You can throw out everything else if you can save a life. So that's really
grace.
Good.
It's an act of grace, yes.
And the other thing, the number 2 was I could think of no better way to memorialize her immediately and significantly.
Right.
And number 3, and this sometimes irks people, but any part of her that can still walk around should walk around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
I like that.
And her memorial is coming up. How do you honor Liel every year?
Well, what we do most years is we meet family and friends at graveside in the morning. This year we're going just the family privately, and then we come down in the afternoon. We take a room at the synagogue, and we, like all good Jewish events, we eat well. And one of the reasons I'm up now is because I've been making cookies and cakes and cornbread. And tomorrow is the salmon and the lasagna.
Oh, wow.
So there's that. We talk about her. We talk about things that she's done. Mm-hmm. Over the years, I've tried to make it less memorialish and more celebratory.
Yeah.
We usually also bring a guest speaker. So last year we had somebody from the world of autism come in and speak about how we deal with autism in Israel, which, by the way, is very good. The year before, we had the Jerusalem transplant coordinator come in and talk about definitions of brain death and what it means to not be able to go back and why it's okay to
let go.
To let go and do transplants.
Well,
I'm sorry
to interrupt you. Is grief? Isn't celebration one of the stages of grief? Is one of the obvious.
I have not heard that, but it's very possibly so.
Be.
You know,
I mean, you talk about grief all the time in your podcast.
Well, my podcast is about grief. It's and it's for the bereaved community.
Yeah.
And we're just starting our 4th year, and every year we try to have a theme. And our first year, we talked a lot about the moment of death, and we thought that was kind of a downer. So in the second year, we actually said this is a celebration of life.
Right.
Whether that is a one of the 5 stages or not, I don't know how many stages they have now, 8 or 9.
I think they've added more stages.
Yeah. Whether celebration is one of those, I don't really know.
It's got to be.
But I think when you reach the point where you can celebrate somebody who's gone, I just think it honors their memory so much.
That's very transitional.
Well, one of the things that you talk about on your show is how everybody grieves differently, and so I think sharing and talking and expressing is important, so that people don't feel like, oh, I'm not grieving correctly. If you need help, get help, but there's no right answer, and death is a part of life, and we all none of us get to escape grieving.
Yeah.
We all have
absolutely,
to do it.
absolutely. The truth is, everybody does grieve differently, but there are common lines that we can relate to, that we can talk to with one another. Everybody at one point or another feels something similar, and of course, you know, every grief is different. The grief of a parent is not the same as the grief of a child.
Sure.
Not the grief. You know, you had Philip Proctor on a couple weeks ago. He did 2 shows with us about people he worked with for 50 years from the fireside. So grief, you know, it isn't necessarily someone close in your family, but someone who's been very close to you. It isn't necessarily death. Sometimes people grieve because things have happened to them and their lives have changed and their dreams are gone. That's also grief. So, you know, it touches everybody all the time in one form or another, even if they're not necessarily aware of it.
Well, as you know, Michael, our own Jamie Alcroft is an organ recipient, and he is forever grateful for the family who, in their grief, handed him his life. Jamie, you were in a hospital. You were told you can't walk past here until you leave here with a new heart.
I cannot pass go.
Yeah, and how talk about that experience.
They are going to collect $2 million.
How many, was it 3 months that you were in there?
Went up.
Yeah, if I pass go. I was 3 months. Yes.
At Cedars?
And I was on the list for only a month of that 3 months.
He was a resident at Cedars, but not in the kind of doctory way.
No, not Caesars. Not Caesars.
And not
either.
Caesars.
Cedars.
Because I played Caesars.
Yeah.
No,
How did that
I played
go?
Cedars.
So, Jamie, what were you feeling when you heard when someone walked in your door and said, "We have a donor"? Were you feeling a mixture of elation, fear, and mourning for the life of someone who was gone in order for you to be receiving this good news? What was the mixture of emotions?
I had so many emotions up to that point, lying in bed for three months, wondering if the last face I saw over my bed was going to be the last human face I ever saw. My son once said, "What makes life so precious is that it doesn't last forever." And I think that that's one of the Thatcherisms that I have in his file, because
he's full of them.
He's full of them.
Yeah.
And I knew it wasn't going to last forever, and I thought this might be my time. And so even every moment in the hospital bed was precious. And when I found out that maybe my heart had arrived. See, I was on the 7th floor, so I was real close to the helicopter pad, and it was like living in a rerun of MASH. It would just like every night I hear that helicopter coming and wondering if it was for me. And then after a while,
and hearing Alan
you
Alda's
have to
voice.
let that go.
Yeah.
And that was only for a month, actually, because I was, like I say, I was only on the list for a month, which was a bit of a miracle.
Wow.
But it was. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I felt, because I knew that person's death had nothing to do with whether I was going to live or not. I was not involved in that person's death. The only thing I'm going to be involved in is giving life to that person's previously enjoyed organs. Mm-hmm. And I prefer to use that than used. I don't like the word used organs.
Mm-hmm. Repurposed.
So I got a 46-year-old heart and a 46-year-old liver. And so I kind of feel like I'm 48 now because that was 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I felt very lucky. I felt very grateful. I felt like it was a moment of grace because I was getting another chance. You know, and it's just.
Can I say something about that?
Down now.
You may, Michael.
Windows down. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I see. From my side of the story, okay. Yeah. So the recipient gave us a chance to do what we did. In other words, the recipient. It made us look. You can't be happy when you lose a child, okay? So it didn't make us happy, but it made us feel so much better about what we had to do, knowing that there was someone in there who was going to receive it, mm-hmm. and gave us a chance to do some grace for them. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, as much as you felt that moment of grace, the person on the other side, or the family of that person on the side, was feeling that same thing.
Yeah.
You know, we can't make death positive, but we can pull something positive out of it. We can take something that makes us feel a little bit better about our grief. And that may be one of the things that helped us through right away. It's very, the connection goes in two directions. That's why I don't like the idea of me being a hero. I didn't do anything heroic.
I know, you shouldn't.
But,
I know.
But it was collaborative.
You were.
But somebody on the other side gave me an opportunity to do that or to be that. And so it works both ways.
I think what makes us feel the most alive is whatever makes us feel the most connected. And this is certainly an entirely connective experience.
Yeah, and maybe
talk about a little bit, if you would, Michael, about how in Israel you do get to meet the people that have received organs. And in U.S., we're kind of like old school and proper about it, and like old adoption law. We don't know.
Well, we don't know.
We're afraid of emotions that somebody
unless the donor reaches out. And my donor was in a motorcycle accident, so it was.
But at some moment, his family made this decision for you.
Yeah. Well, he had a donor card.
Or he had a donor card. So talk about the way things work in Israel, Michael, and who you met. Yeah. And because we have some artwork from the little girl that received a kidney.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
I might actually lose it.
Okay. We're here for you, man. We are.
I know. It works this way. You can tell the transplant organization that you're interested in meeting the recipient, but the recipient has to want to meet you. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. And I think it's the opposite here.
It is the opposite
in the States. Yeah. But anyway, along the way, we got a faxed letter that one of the recipients wrote. And then she sent another one, and then we heard from her no more. One of them wasn't interested in meeting us, and we heard that her recovery was not going well. We don't have any clue if she's even survived. We know nothing about her. One day I got a phone call from an older woman who I'd never met before, and she was telling me her story, and I understood from that every breath she took and every word, here it comes, every word she spoke was coming out of my daughter's lungs.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
All that air.
And
breath.
And it turns out that she was a Yemenite woman. Her name is Mazel, which means fortune or luck.
Absolutely.
Like you've heard Mazel Tov, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So she had great fortune. I haven't spoken to her in a couple of years, but she was 66 at the time and living with her children until she recovered and had those lungs. But the story you want to hear, I think, is the story of how I met the little girl. My nephew's wife, my nephew lives in New Jersey, and his wife had a friend who was studying in Jerusalem. And the caretaker where she was studying was a guy named Hussein, whose daughter had just received a kidney, and it made the news, and she heard my last name, Lieben. So she called her friend in New Jersey and said, "Are you related to this guy in Israel?" So I got an email from my nephew in New Jersey saying some guy in Jerusalem would like to meet me because his daughter has my daughter's kidney.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, it had to go all the way around the world to come back.
Wow.
Small world.
Wow.
So I got in touch with Hussein, and he said, you're either coming to us or we're coming to you. Now, that was really nice, but at the time in my family, I was really the only one who was interested in meeting recipients. Everyone else was kind of a little standoffish. So I went out and I bought the biggest Minnie Mouse doll that I could find for a 7.5-year-old. By then it was a year later, she was 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I called them up, and just go back a second. The week that it was done, or a couple of days after it was done, his mother, who speaks a little Hebrew, was on the radio being interviewed as the recipient, and I was on with her. So there was that background of communications between us. And I said, I have a special request. I'm coming to see you. Can I bring a cameraman with me to record our meeting? And they said yes.
Wow. Yeah.
Full disclosure, I've never looked at that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Never looked at it.
But it's there.
Yeah.
But I have it up
But
here
it's
on my
there.
shelf somewhere in this
Yeah,
little
it's
mini
there.
cassette. And anyway, so I have it. And there are no machines left in the world to play it.
Transfer it to
I was gonna
digital.
say.
Well, you can. I was going to say.
Yeah. So there it is.
Put it on 8-track.
So I went out there.
It's on an
and
Etch-a-Sketch.
I started
Yeah.
bawling my eyes out on the steps going up to their house.
God.
So I was a puddle when I got there.
Sure.
But
But
they
it
were a
meant so
delightful
much to you.
family.
It was such a mitzvah,
And-
wasn't it?
it was
was just-
and they are they're a delightful family, and true to Muslim form, they were very gracious, and there was, you're very welcome in their home, and there's food, and I met the little girl,
Wow.
and I asked if I could hug her, because at the moment that I hugged her, my kidney and her kidney were as close as they had ever been in life when I hugged my daughter.
Ah,
Yeah.
jeez.
That's the director's eye, right? Because
Yeah,
we're
really.
filming this, right? So so there's that. And then I asked her, I said, could you draw me a picture? And you have it there. And you can bring it up. But that's
This-
the picture that she drew for me. Her name was Hala. There she is on the left.
Is that that's a Muslim name?
Hala is a Muslim name. Yeah.
Allah? Palestinian?
Well,
Are they
we
Palestinians
can talk
or
about
Muslim?
what is Palestine and what is a Palestinian, but I don't really want to
I
get
see.
Yeah.
Then we get into that.
Yeah.
I see.
But she lives in East Jerusalem,
we'll
and
edit.
she lives in a neighborhood which I think if any changes were made, she'd probably still be on this side. Nevertheless,
We'll edit that out.
We know she's
it's
not French.
Yes.
She's not French. It is a loaded moment,
Allah.
but I think we broke down a lot of walls there.
Mikhail, yes.
That is
Heart to
wonderful.
heart,
Thank
kidney
you.
to kidney.
Thank you for sharing that, Michael.
That's
We're going to break
wonderful.
for commercial, and we're going to be right back
Sure.
with more
Wow.
stories.
I need a commercial.
Welcome to A Game of Two Scarves, the world's first footballing podcast, brought to you by the two great mates who just so happen to support the deadly rivals of Newcastle and Sunderland.
Each week, we bring you a down-to-earth, informed discussion on our respective football clubs. Everything from post-match opinions to thoughts on who we thought did well, who didn't, and where we think the club needs to progress going forward.
We bring the odd guests along for the ride too, often from clubs outside of the region, so, as well as our own clubs, we do like to discuss the latest big news from around the world of the greatest game.
So sit back, put your allegiances to one side, and enjoy the chat and humour of A Game of Two Scarves podcast.
Love that dialect.
I'm going to listen to them just so I can
I
hear
will.
them talk.
Oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
understand
Yeah,
what they're
name that neighborhood.
Jamie,
great.
Jamie and Danny, do those accents right now.
Well, I cheeky monkey. I
No,
couldn't do it.
no,
if I
because
wanted to.
last week
Like-
the club had no chance
I
at
know,
all on that,
I know.
and it
And they
doesn't
came
matter.
round, didn't
no,
they?
that was
He came
terrible.
round, didn't
He got
he?
to fire that
Sure he
coach.
did. Sure he did.
Bloody marvelous.
Suddenly, I
hell.
thought the Manscaped was a better commercial.
Cheeky monkey.
Yeah,
We'll
bend
say
over.
this.
We'll take care of it for you.
Michael
I
was
knew
so
he'd bend
upset
over.
when he found out we weren't going to be doing Manscaped
No,
this
I
week.
know, I was so ready
He was
for it.
ready
I
for
was going
it.
to ask for a complimentary package.
They dropped
Oh,
us. We
yeah.
made too much fun of them. Yeah.
No. No, we.
No, but
We just, we'll become infamous for dropping sponsors because we make fun of them.
No.
We need sponsors.
They loved
we need
it.
sponsors.
They loved
I
it.
know they loved it.
Michael is a contributor to the Hug Podcast Network, where members of the congenital heart defect community share and interact. And we have a link for that. Yes.
What have you done to Anna's face? It looks,
She's got a big
got a big
play button
arrow
on her
on it.
mouth.
I know it's a play button. I know.
She's
the
also
Hug-
a traffic signal.
The Hug Podcast Network features a series of podcasts, including Heart to Heart with Michael, a podcast for the bereaved community. Can you talk about how you became involved with them, Michael?
Sure. When Liel was born, the first thing I did, remember in the early days of public internet, there were listservs. Remember those? So I got on a listserv for families with children with congenital heart defects.
And so what year is this when Liel's born?
She was born in 1997.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
And so we were about 800 families around the world sharing information about our kids with congenital heart defects.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, Anna was in that group and went off to make her podcast called Heart to Heart with Anna, which is about the congenital heart family, and it was information, empowerment, news, and she's still doing it years later.
Yeah, I've been on that podcast.
Yes, you have. You and I were on it together.
That's right. We were. Sorry,
And,
guys. I'm seeing other podcasts.
Wow.
After
There goes
Liel
the
died,
relationship.
she invited me. After Liel died, she invited me to be on her show.
Yeah.
And we did a half hour on Liel. And then she said to me, when it was over, she said, I want to do a series on bereavement, but I'm not bereaved. Would you do it? I said, well, how many do you want? So I want to do once a month for a year. I want 12 episodes. And I said, okay, I'll give you 3. And if I'm still alive after 3, and apparently I thought I meant 3 episodes. I must have meant 3 years because we've just started our 4th year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Something
Be surprised how many people really want to come on and talk about grief.
Well, yeah, that's great that you're helping that community, that you're the support for.
Well,
the
Michael's
community.
podcast is designed to empower those who have lost a loved one. Guests include members of the bereaved community, people of faith, doctors, and other professionals who discuss topics important to those who have suffered the death of a loved one. A Moment with Michael is YouTube videos that Michael makes where Michael shares insights and wisdom. Tell us what you hear from people who are listening and who are gaining strength and healing guidance from you. How do people reach out?
When we get back, as after the broadcast, after the podcasts, we get back some interesting feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sometimes from the guests and sometimes just from listeners.
I listened to a few of those today. I really enjoyed them.
I listened to.
appreciate
I watched
that.
last
really
night.
great.
Yeah.
What not to say? I like that one.
Yeah, what not to say.
Oh, what not to say? Oh,
Yeah.
man, that's 1 minute. What not to say?
Yeah.
And they're all a minute because that's what you can get on
Do we have time to watch that? Can we watch
Instagram.
that?
Okay, play what
But-
not to say.
Do we have the technology?
I'm gonna turn this into a remix.
We have the technology.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. I was just quoting.
Francesco's holding up his finger.
Yeah.
And Michael's holding up his finger, and together
Okay,
it's
fingers
2
up.
fingers in
Recently.
the air.
Now the thumbs
Recently,
are
my
up.
Now
friend-
he's hitchhiking.
Here we go.
Oh my gosh. Recently, my friend's mother passed away, and our conversation invariably turned to things people say. Now, we all try to say comforting things from time to time, and it generally comes from a very good place. But the thing that stuck out in my friend's mind was, how old was your mother? As if to say, well, if she had lived long enough, then her life had had more value, and it was kind of okay. But the truth is, your mother is still your mother, and even if she lives to be 300 years old, it's never a good time, and it always hurts. Sometimes saying nothing is the best thing you can do. For example, in the Bible, Job's friends were at their comforting best until they opened their mouths. So please do not speak on behalf of or in defense of God. He's really got that covered without you. So what can we say? Well, I'm really sorry this happened to you is a great way to invite conversation and a sharing of grief. But my favorite is, tell me about your loved one, because that shows immediately that you care and opens up the conversation for them to share grief, and they now can guide the conversation, and you don't have to say anything awkward or hurtful again. Have a great week.
That's all really, really
Isn't that
good.
terrific?
Another one
Yeah.
that you get if it's a cousin or an uncle, they'll say, "Were you close?"
Yeah.
Like it.
But that's not, as
I didn't even know him, so it's okay that he's dead.
I watched that last night, and it just brought back so many memories of not only being in a position where people were saying stuff to me, but what you can say to someone because you care so much and want to make them feel good. And
it's the most awkward thing in the world.
But you know what? To me, in a way, there is no wrong thing to say because both sides know what both sides are going through. So somehow you're jumping over the gap and at least starting the conversation.
Well, you're right in that it's something that we all face, but we don't all face the death of a child,
No.
and we don't all face the death of a mother at a young age. There's just different levels of bereavement based on how interwoven that person was into your life.
Right.
If it's a person that you were interacting with every day, and it was a big part of how you planned your life and your day, a spouse or something of that nature, and they're suddenly gone, there's just no words.
But if your mother lives to 300, I think both sides. I think you can say anything you want because
she lived.
Well,
yeah,
like when Noah died, people were like, "Finally."
Yeah, especially the animals.
Let me say something there. There are so many more wrong things than right things. It is so easy to say the wrong thing.
So give us some other examples because these are fun.
Well, okay.
Because now we're just mocking people.
My friend,
Louise is
who's
having fun.
at the time was about 67 or 68, lost her mother, and she went home to be with the family. And people started asking her, "How old was your mom?" And she started saying 60, because it's such a ridiculous thing.
It was easy.
It comes from a good place, all right? People want to say something, and they want to say something nice, and they want to be cheerful, and they want to make you better. First of all, you're not going to get better, at least not this week, maybe next week. Right. Also, in Jewish mourning, we have a whole week where we sit at home and guests come in and comfort us, like Job.
So way more chances to be wrong.
So many.
Oh, absolutely.
And to eat.
So many.
And to eat.
Thank God for the food.
And I always say I can't imagine. Because I can't imagine. Because that's, I mean, I've experienced death myself in my life, and I can imagine what that feels like. I know what that feels like, but I can't imagine what it feels like for somebody else.
I think a lot of the questions have to do with people wanting to. It's sort of selfish. It's people wanting to believe that this can't happen to them. So when they say,
really?
"How old?"
what?
and you say, "My mother was 98," they're like, "Oh."
I got a few years.
If you say
couldn't hang on 2 more,
someone died of lung cancer, you'll say, "Did they smoke?" Because you want to figure out how you're safe. None of us are safe.
You know what? Before she died, I asked my friends on the listserv. I said, "Send me some of the dumb things that you hear." Now, this was not about death. This was about kids with heart disease. So send me some of the ridiculous things that you hear. And I expected to get a few good ones. I got 10 pages of single space, 12 to the inch. Amazing things that people say, and it comes down to 2 categories. Some people are trying to be nice but don't know how,
right?
And you have to be kind to them, okay? And the example is you're giving your child over for heart surgery. Outwardly he looks fine, and they're going to cut him up like a chicken and play with his heart, which is maybe this big, and then put it back together again. So your friend comes up to you and says, "I know exactly how you feel. My kid had tubes in his ears, and I was a mess." Well, if that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, I understand what you're doing is you're digging into the thing that gives you the most pain and the most fear, and you're trying to relate to mine. That's okay. Then you get people that are just evil. You have stupid and evil. And evil, they'll say things like, "Well, did you do a lot of drugs when you were younger?"
Oh, my God.
Whoa.
Okay. God. So there are people you need to get away from.
Was he a drinker?
Lose.
But you call
quickly.
it evil, Michael. I still think it's that category of people that want you to tell them that's not going to happen when you have a baby. I need to be able to check that off the list of things that could happen.
He's got better evil.
You did a bad thing. That's why that happened to you.
I'll take evil for 100, Alex.
I mean, it's definitely selfish and self-absorbed. But I hate to just call it evil. I don't think they're trying to inflict pain.
Let's
they're
not
trying to
call
take
it evil.
They're trying to take pain off of them, as this isn't something I need to worry about because I didn't do drugs.
Well, I'll give you an evil one then. Okay. So,
There we go.
He's like, no, it's evil.
See, yeah,
I got
you
evil.
could pry one out of him.
I'll give you one evil.
Play the evil
so my
card.
Okay.
My wife's former best friend.
Ooh, I like
right
the
away
word.
it sounds
What a
like
caveat.
That's
Okay.
There you go.
caviar.
Said if I had a kid like yours, I'd kill myself. Thank you.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I feel really good too.
What?
Yeah, that's
Best
um,
ex-best friend.
I'm surprised they haven't made a card with that on it.
What the hell?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Would we
So
get
this
sued if I
can't be the
mention
first.
the name of the company that starts with an H that makes cards?
Oh,
No.
no.
But
Okay.
that can't be the first stupid evil thing that came out of the mouth of this person. It can't be.
No, probably not. She was probably stupid and
There were red
and
flags,
evil.
and then that was a tipping point. All right.
What is your reaction to when they say that grief is our penalty for loving? It's what we have to pay for the act of loving.
I've never heard that, but I will give you an
It was
answer.
not
to
a
that. I had
best-selling poster.
No, it's not.
No, I had a guest.
I don't have the T-shirt.
on my podcast last year.
Yeah.
And he said that grief and love are two sides of the same coin, and that grief is an act of loving. When I'm grieving somebody, take out
It's
the word
loving.
grief and
It's
say
loving.
love.
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
wonderful. I'm so glad you cleared that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, hey, I learned something 3 years on the air.
Hey, yeah,
And,
you got to.
I was
learned
listening
stuff.
to
You wrote it down.
the current podcast. I can't remember the name of the guest, but she lost her husband, and she talks about
Right.
having to sort of re-identify herself because so there's so much that comes with loss, and a part of what comes with loss is like having to redefine ourselves and missing the love that we received from that person, not just the love we gave that person, but what they gave us. And so there's just so much that's a part of being alive is interweaving ourselves with each other, and to pull those strands apart, it's just.
A question for Michael. You started to address this. You said that something you learned from a particular podcast, and I wonder over the process of this, over the progression of time here, doing these podcasts and doing these minutes, et cetera, how you have grown and what it's given to you, and maybe moments of enlightenment that have come to you that you didn't expect.
I'll steal a copyright and say bazinga, because that's really the thing. There's two things I want to say there. After we were on for about a year, HUG, which is Hearts Unite the Globe, I attended a board meeting there in Texas. I Skyped in, and they were curious as to how effective we were. I said, look, if we help only one person with their grief, then I think we've done our job. And I am that person. So,
there you go.
We're good.
Yeah.
The other thing is,
It's up to you.
it's the middle of the night. Your question again?
It's had to
Things
help
I've
you.
learned.
Yeah, what
Things or just enlightenment or moments where you went, oh God, the fact that I'm doing this, look what I just got a gift put in my hand here that I didn't expect.
I've had a number of episodes where people have said gems that have stayed with me and that I share with other people. And what's really important, and we touched on this before, and I don't want to not say this tonight. Grief shared is grief lightened. So the more you tell your story and the more you share and the more people interact with you, your grief is lightened. And that, by the way, if you've ever experienced Shiva, you sit home for a week and your friends come and surround you and they cook for you and they bring you food and they make sure you're okay and they talk to you and they enable you to talk about your loved one. All of that is sharing grief.
Yeah, you talk
So in
about
that
Uncle
one week,
Milt. Yeah.
a
Everybody
tremendous
tell
lightening
stories
of-
about him, and it brings them back to life for a while.
Well, when you
Whoever it is.
talked about what to say, tell me about the person. Tell me about the person, because it really does heal to talk about the person that they matter, their life, not their death. Let's talk about the person and let's quote the person and let's remember lessons we learned from the person. And so when someone asks you about the person, they honor that this is a person,
That
a
is so right.
whole 360 life that touched so many others, and with stories and dreams and goals and that's I think the best thing is remember that no matter how they're grieving, I think asking about the person is going to be okay.
Absolutely. Today on one of the internet groups, I saw somebody wrote, if you don't mention a child who's died because you're afraid you'll remind the parents of something difficult,
Right.
They already know.
Yeah.
They haven't forgotten, and you're not going to remind them.
They're used to it.
But they want to talk about them. And I, to back that up, last year or the year before, we had a guest on, and she said, just say their names. That's what we want to hear as
Celebrate
parents.
them.
Liao.
Is it, I wonder, Michael, is it like kind of a little bit frustrating to you that you're probably around other people all the time who are much less comfortable talking about loss and death and, you know, being able to celebrate the lives of those around them for fear of losing them, and you're so comfortable with the subject matter? Like, do you ever feel like, you know, I wish this was like easier for everyone to talk about?
Yeah, that actually happened to me. A woman in my synagogue, I had forgotten that her partner had recently died, and I had just come back. I was sent to a conference on grief in Eilat for 4 days, and I came back full of information and a lot of validation, because I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV and I don't give out advice, but we talk a lot, and the danger is I might say something that's wrong. So I came back very validated for this conference, where I was the only one who wasn't a psychologist there, and everything I had been saying was apparently, you know,
good,
on the mark. I guess experience counts, right?
Yeah.
So I came back to this conference and I was pumped and I was glowing. And I said, I just came back from this conference on grief, and it was so exciting and so wonderful. And you would be surprised, you'd be amazed how, you know, talking about grief is how good it is. And she just looked at me and said, okay, thanks.
Really?
She wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
So tell me, when you go to a grief conference, and you're at the conference, and you've gone to all of the workshops and so forth, at night, do you sit around and tell jokes? You know, or is it a
not
totally
at the conference? But I'll tell you where you do sit around and tell jokes.
I mean, where does humor come in? Where does humor come in?
At the conference, I went home to an Airbnb, so I wasn't around at night with everyone. I don't know what they were talking about.
Okay.
But I will tell you this: if you've ever been through 7 days of Shiva after somebody dies, you get a little cabin feverish, and by the third or fourth day, it's an actual laugh riot. I think that's part of the healing.
Yeah.
It is part of the
I really do.
Part of the
Shiva's a wonderful thing, because it sort of lets you go down as low as you want to go, but it's like being strapped into a chair in one of those rides. So it keeps you there, and then it lets you come back up. It guides you back up at the end of the week, so you can go back out and rejoin the world.
Now, it's
not a 7-day fix, but it's a really big help.
It's wonderful.
Michael,
it's a really good start.
What are some of the places that you recommend people go online to share and to commune with others who are experiencing grief?
There are a number of online communities on Facebook. Just look up grief or bereavement, or there's one called My Child Has Wings, and there's so many others. Some of them are specifically about children, some of them are not. They're all general. Reddit has a number of groups, which I've been recently learning to explore. It's funny, I used to be the 14-year-old kid who could put your stereo together, but I can't get through Reddit now.
That skill will come back.
I hope so.
Someday.
Because, who knows?
And you have a Facebook page and a Patreon page. And can you talk about how that works, Michael?
Oh, thank you so much. I don't want to give anybody in your program any ideas, but everything that we do on Heart to Heart with Anna and Heart to Heart with Michael, and there are writers and there's producers and there's an executive producer. There's people who do memes and people who do all kinds of publishing and advertising.
Yeah.
All of us work for free. We don't get paid. We don't do anything for money. So
and I get 10%
imagine
of
that. Imagine that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we do survive from donations. Some of them are personal donations. Board members have been very kind and opened up, but you can't go like that forever. And so we have a Patreon page. I think it's.
I saw that. I like the names for the patrons.
Heart to Heart, whatever it is. But you can find a link to it on our website, on the Hearts Unite the Globe website. You can find us. And
that's wonderful that you're doing that.
You can be a member of HUG, the Hearts Unite the Globe network, and you can help us stay online. The truth is that our expenses are not that high, because the advertising that is done is volunteer.
Well,
but the actual cost of keeping a podcast on the air is really not.
When
really.
you mentioned hug and you're in Israel, I wondered if anybody had ever come, because the first thing I thought of was hug sameach.
No,
you may use that. That is my gift, because I said
Hug
because we used to say that. We used to say that greeting in temple. We would say hug sameach.
And what does it mean?
It's a holiday.
It's like good
Well,
yontif.
we actually had a funnier thing. We, for a very short time, we went to one of those chat networks and said, if you want to talk after the show, after a podcast, you want to come in and talk to us, we'll be here. So we'd go and talk to people, and we set up a room called Hug. And all these people looking for online sex were coming in saying, you got hugs here?
Oh, sure.
And so we abandoned that one pretty quick.
All right, that's a mix-up.
Yeah.
So Jamie brought a letter that was written by Ken Kesey after the passing of his son, Jed, and Jamie's going to read a portion of that for
Ken
us.
Kesey from the Merry Pranksters, of course.
Yes.
And off of
One Flew Over the
Cuckoo's
Nest.
So
Ken writes, after the passing of his son Jed, then the doctor asked a strange thing. He wanted to know what kind of kid Jed was. Zane and I both demanded what he meant. He said he was wondering how Jed would have felt about being an organ donor. Our hearts both jumped. He would love it. Jed's always been as generous as they come. Take whatever you can use. The doctor waited for our elation to ease, then told us that to take the kidneys, they had to take them before the life support was turned off. Did we understand? After a while, we told him we did. So Faye and I had to sign 5 copies apiece on a cold Formica countertop, while the machine pumped out the little beep, beep, beep in the dim tangle of technology behind us. In all my life, waking and dreaming, I've never imagined anything harder. Everybody went in and told him goodbye, kissed his broken nose, shook his hand, squeezed his big old hairy foot, headed down the corridor. Somebody said it might be a good idea to get a script for some kind of downers. We'd all been up for about 40 hours, either in the chapel praying like maniacs or at his bedside talking to him. We didn't know if we could sleep. Chuck and I walked back to the intensive care ward to ask. All the doctors were there, bent over, a long list, phony numbers, matching blood types, ordering nurses. In such a hurry, they hardly had the time to offer any sympathy. Busy and justly so. But the nurses bent over their clipboards, could barely see to fill out the forms. They phoned the hotel about an hour later to tell us it was over, and that the kidneys were in perfect shape. That was about 4 a.m. They phoned again a little after 6 to say that the kidneys were already in 2 young somebodies. What a world. I've heard since that they used 12 things out of him, including corneas, and the red-winged blackbirds sing in the budding green-gage plum tree. With love, Ken. P.S. When Jed's wallet was finally sorted out of the debris and confusion of the wreck, it was discovered that he'd already provided for such a situation. He had signed on the place in his driver's license indicating that he wanted to be an organ donor in the event of, well, one man gathers what another man spills.
Beautiful. All right. I would like to.
Who else read for that?
Ken Kesey. Sean Connery did.
I would like to thank you for being with us, Michael. Where else should people go to find you online?
Well, I'm all over Facebook. Just me, Michael Lieben, and I'm just out there pontificating on all kinds of things, sometimes getting a little rough.
And the hug URL?
And if the hug URL, I think you have it. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's Hug-Podcast Network, but I'm not 100% sure. And it's been changed. That's the old one that still works.
All right. Well,
Michael, when do you sleep?
He's going to sleep right after this.
Oh.
I want to thank Michael.
No, I don't.
No,
I want to thank.
He's up to all hours. Sleep. We communicate online all the time. He DMs me when I least expect it.
I live like I'm in New York. I have to. If I need to call Jamie, I need to call Jamie 10 hours. in history, right? So here I am in the future. By the way, as far as I can see, 10 hours from you in the future.
Yeah.
I looked out my window this evening.
Yeah.
No flying cars yet.
Good.
Tomorrow's looking
Soon.
good. All right,
The
I want to
Jetsons.
thank our friend Michael Lieben for being with us from Israel.
Michael.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
my
Thank you so
co-host.
much. I've had a wonderful time.
Thank
you guys
you
are
to
the best.
Thank you to our co-hosts Jamie Elcroft and Danny Mann. Our producer is Dina Friedman. In the booth today, we've got Francesco Damondo and Michael Tellup. Let's see. Our webmaster is Bill Filipiak. Our sound mixer is John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker. Be safe, be well, be kind.